And welcome to Knowing You, Being You. I am delighted to be joined in this episode by Mariana Ruiz, who is a certified business coaching consultant who helps other seasoned coaches and consultants scale their six-figure group coaching programs. And I'm really delighted she's here because we have networked for many years now, but never actually connected properly in person. So this is a delight for me to have her here. Welcome, Mariana.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to meet you virtually.
Yes.
And like in a more in-person
yes,
way.
exactly. What I would love for you to do is to tell us a little bit about your story of how you got to where you are now, because you have a very varied background, and as many people do, but it's an interesting journey that you've been on.
Yeah, thank you. So my background is in nursing. I graduated when I was around 23 years old and became a nurse, and I got my first job in neurosurgical ICU, which is brain surgery. So I loved it. I absolutely love that position. But the only problem was my body did not agree with me. And I had all of these like kind of physical stuff going on where I was working night shift. I was tired all the time. My body was always hurting, like all of my body. We were lifting, heavy people, like 200, 400 pounds all the time, every couple hours. And so it was a very physically demanding job. And soon I said, you know what, I feel like I can use, my brain and my skills in a different way. And so I climbed up the corporate ladder. That took some time, but I finally did it and got an office job, like the cushy one, like my own office. Like I got to wear clothes, like work day shift, all the pros that nurses are like, yes, that is the dream, right? And then in that job, I felt really unfulfilled in my family life because my son at that time was 3 months old. I would just basically drop him off and at daycare in the morning and get him ready for daycare, drop him off at daycare, pick him up at 6 p.m., give him dinner, and in bed by, 7:30. And it just broke my heart to see him not be able to spend any time with him really, except the weekends. And the weekends were so fun, and I just got to really enjoy his presence. And that hurt. I mean, it just hurt. It was very difficult for me as a mother. So I decided to, on that time after he was in bed, I said, you know what, I'm going to start a health coaching business because I had recently lost about 80 pounds working with a health coach at the end when I got to a plateau. And she really helped me to see the power of coaching, what was possible, that there was an online space at all to create a business in, right? All of these things that I didn't even know were possible came through that relationship. And so I said, you know what, I'm a nurse, like I can use my skills and my knowledge there. And so that's what I did. And so I started off as a health coach. I nearly quit a few months in because I found out I was pregnant again. And I was like, you know what, I have to quit. I said this to my coach, the same girl. I said, I have to quit. I'm gaining weight every day with this pregnancy, and I'm telling people how to lose weight. This is a fraudulent situation. Clearly, I don't know what I'm talking about. And I almost quit. And then she said, no, you can totally do this. You can just paint the picture of health. You can do it. Keep going. And I was so grateful for that moment and for her telling me that, because a few months later, my daughter was born. And she was born at 28 weeks. So it was intense. She ended up being in the ICU for over 2 months, heart surgery, physical therapy, like all of the things, right? And so she finally came home to me after 68 days, and she came home on breathing monitors. And so the options were, hire a nurse to take care of her, or just be the nurse that's taking care of her. And so that's what I did. I just went all in on my business. Luckily, during that NICU time, I would just work from the pump room at the NICU, and on my laptop, I was building my website for the first time at that time. I was doing sales calls. I mean, I was hustling in that NICU pump room. I got so much done. And then eventually yeah, when she came home, I just continued onward, right? And my business, because I had spent more time on it than I was able to do with working full time, I was like getting some steam and really moving ahead. And suddenly, after a few months, like by around the time she finally came off the breathing monitors, moms were like, how are you doing this? What are you doing? We see you online, we see you on Facebook, like, what are you doing? How are you making money doing this? Like, we want to know, right? And especially with everything you've gone through with your child, like, how is that even possible? And so that's when I started coaching mom entrepreneurs. So that was my first brand of business coaching. Was mom entrepreneurs. And the reason I shifted, right? So I teach group coaching to impact driven entrepreneurs. And the reason I shifted is because after about probably a year and a half of coaching moms, I started getting really great referrals coming in. And I think referrals are an excellent way to grow your business, by the way. So if you want me to talk about that, I certainly can. But so I was getting great referrals in, but they weren't always women and they weren't always moms. So I was coaching men and I was coaching people who were not mothers. And on my discovery calls, on my sales calls, I always make sure that it's a perfect fit for me too. And so I had to get really honest with myself. I was on a business trip and I was kind of like reviewing my business, and I thought, what made me really want to work with these people, even though they were not moms, right? Because there was something there that's really beautiful. And it came to the impact driven, right? So people who want to make a difference in the world, who are here to serve and to help people. And that's how I got onto the rebrand. But honestly, it's always been the thing for me. It's just kind of like the external look different. So that was kind of the shift and the change.
It's funny, isn't it, how often it is the external picture that changes, not the internal. We just refine the internal, and we get better at recognizing what it is, and we lose our distraction with what the external titles and tags and labels are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it has been quite a journey for you, because I think we first connected back when you were originally working with mums. So, it's come a long way. So, what's the key? I mean, when you're talking to somebody, you're going, right, is this somebody who really wants to create impact? What is it that you're looking for? What is it that tells you that that's the right person?
Yeah, so I kind of look at 5 levels of impact. Some people are more driven by one of the 5s, or a combination. But usually I assess that, so I can talk about what each one is, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first level of impact is like your family, your life, your personal stuff. And quite honestly, I think this is a great driver, but I don't think it's enough to really push you forward when business online is so hard.
Yes.
Right? So I think when the going gets tough, like I just want to make money so that I can support my family is okay, but it's not going to get you there. It's not going to allow you to be up at night, right? Because you can make money in a job, right? It's not that. Yeah. And so I look for other layers, and so I'll get to those, right? So the first one is kind of what does my life look like? What does my schedule look like? There's layers within that, right? What is my life overall? Where do I live in the world, right? That kind of stuff. But it's centered around yourself, right? The second level of impact is around the work you do for your clients, right? So a lot of the people that I work with are coaches and consultants. So they're driven by, oh my gosh, I can get somebody else results. And that to me is so much more profound and so much more motivating, right? When the going gets tough and you're like, I just cannot even promote myself for one more second, right? You're like, but if I don't, there's somebody out there who might not be able to know and find out about my service and have that transformation. And that's where you start to see that, that driver really push you forward. So really, number 2 is all about the difference you can make in somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Then we have the third one, which is the difference that we can make in the people we hire. So the first time I experienced this was when I brought on a nanny. And I had hired a nanny we at the time lived in Texas. So I got a nanny to help me with the kids. I was thrilled about it. And she was a retired woman who retired from a very good job in a nonprofit. And she was struggling, and for me to hire her on was a great way for her to make extra money and to do things in her life. One of the things that really shook me to the core and was like, this is a huge impact and I want to make more of it, was when it was, 100 some degrees in South Texas in the summer. And she had no air conditioner because she couldn't afford it. And through working at my home, right, watching my kids, and she would cook dinner, so she's a blessing. So she, through that job, she was able to purchase a air conditioner. I didn't know until she was like, "Oh, I finally was able to get an air conditioner." I was like, oh, this is huge, right? Like the impact that we are having in the people we are able to hire, even if we can't afford to do full-time, even if we can't afford to do benefits, right? Like that is an impact. It just gives me goosebumps thinking about it because we don't always see it until we've lived it, right? So that's the third level of impact. And then the fourth level of impact is philanthropy. I think this is very common in what most people think about when they think about impact, right? Is giving back in a bigger way.
Yeah.
I find that if my clients are struggling with sales and getting out there, which most of my clients are because they're really driven by purpose and meaningful work, if they're struggling and they're doing great, like I have one client who she had a great corporate job. She was already making six figures in her corporate job. And so she was doing this as a passion project. However, like for her to ask for more money, she almost felt like she couldn't receive it, right? Like she felt like, who am I to take more money? Or like, what am I going to do with this money? Like, it's not even about the money. I want to just help the people and do the thing. And so for her, we ended up deciding for her to do a donation goal. And so she decided to give away part of her, whatever she was bringing in through her business was going to go to charities that she cared about or causes that she cared about. And for her, that was a driver enough to finally say, okay, I can work through this promotion thing. I can make the promotion that I need to do. I can launch the thing. I can get out and ask for the money because it's not for me. Right. For her at that point, having a multiple six-figure job made her feel like, oh my God, can I really ask for more money? And shifting that to, a bigger cause other than her own self allowed her to move through that bump. So that's another way that you could think about it, is through philanthropy. And then the last one is really, that's 4. So 5 is the invisible impact. This one is my favorite because we get in our head. So invisible impact is what we don't know, what we don't see. That is when you do your Facebook post and you're thinking, oh my gosh, why did I even bother? Like nobody saw this. I got one like, and I was so vulnerable. I just shared my truth and like, what just happened there? But then, months down the line, you go on a discovery call or you're talking to one of your clients and they're like, yeah, but I remember one time you shared this one thing. And you're like, that's funny. I thought nobody saw that. Or invisible impact can also be like the ripples of whatever you're doing, right? So it can be things like, okay, you help somebody to lose weight. Like you helped in phase number 2, right? You helped your client to lose, let's say it was my coach who helped me to lose 80 pounds. Losing 80 pounds helped me to build this business because it helped me to see the power of coaching, right? And so none of this would have been even possible if she hadn't initially started our relationship, been out there doing her work in the world and sharing her light and helping me, right? Yeah. So those are invisible impacts. Like we don't even know the magnitude, but they're usually pretty profound.
That's one of my favorites as well. It's just like it's the ripples of what you do. You cannot see them, you can't fathom. You just got to have faith that they are there. And
Mhm.
sometimes you get a little bit of a reflection back, and you. I mean, it's like yesterday I had somebody email me and say, "You said one sentence to me in a conversation we had. This was months ago. I don't even remember saying it. You said one sentence to me, and it has completely transformed everything." You go,
Wow.
oh, and that's, you don't know, do you? It's like, as you say, you can put your message out there and no one will necessarily engage with it. It does not necessarily mean they haven't absorbed it. You put your energy out there, you put your message out there, it does its thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Very powerful. So now you are, one of the things that you're focusing on really is about how do people put that, how do they make that impact that they want to create from within tangible? So how do you work with people to help them make that tangible?
Yeah, so we can start to look at each of these and see which ones your drivers are and decide that whatever fears you have are less powerful than these drivers. That to me is the most tangible thing we can do, right? Is like I mentioned, my friend was fear of sales, right? Her fear of sales was less important than her driver to make a difference in the world with this organization she wanted to donate to,
Yeah.
right? So whatever your fears are and whatever you're struggling with, right? Remember that the driver can really help you to propel you forward.
Yes. Yes. So being connected to that driver and recognizing it, because quite
Mm-hmm.
often I think particularly with philanthropy or some of those bigger impacts that are outside of ourselves rather than our home life, which we can control, that we don't, we just carry them around with us, don't we, as a desire, whereas we don't actually necessarily say, this is what I actually choose to do. So by bringing it out into the open, we give it power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it can kind of, just diminish the fear and that noise in our head, right? That's like, just, are you sure you can post this? Like, is this really going to be the thing, right? Or it's not good enough, or all of that, right? We can really silence that by saying, it's okay because this is more important. And so, again, recognizing it, acknowledging it, and moving forward.
Mm. Yes. So yeah, it's that that bit. We get so caught up and tied up in all of the, this is how you build a business, or this is how you do this, and we forget that unless it is actually connected back to what we really want, that it can't go, and it hasn't got a channel to go to, because going down this process or that system or that framework, it can't sort of connect to that process unless it's given its own sort of life form. If that does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, like this is the jump off point, right? Because if we aren't sure how we want our life or our business to look, and even number one is not a selfish thing, right? Like the impact number one is not a selfish thing. Like I would just work with somebody on this yesterday, and she said, she's a relatively older woman, right? She has grandkids that are on their way. And so she said, you know what? I really want to spend time with my grandkids. I don't want to be on social media. Like, I don't want my business to rely on social media. I want to be with my grandkids. I want that to be my presence and what I'm focused on. And so I said, great, let's work with that, right? You don't have to use Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, which all require you live interacting almost every day, right? Those don't have to be your platforms. You can choose to go, a different route, like Pinterest and SEO and all that, right? Like you can build it in the way that's going to facilitate the lifestyle that you truly want. And I think it takes that stepping back to say, what really do I care about? What is this really going to look like, right? And what will this strategy do for me? And not just me, right, but all of the impacts, right? Because eventually, you know, you're going to have to make decisions about team. There gets to a point where you cannot continue on if you don't hire. And it's a painful moment, believe me.
Yes.
So those are the decisions, right? Where you say, okay, well, how am I going to go bigger? Am I going to keep growing, or am I going to not grow? Right. And it's okay to stay small and in a small team. It's absolutely okay. But when you're solid on your decision, you know yourself, you've done the internal work, you can be certain and not let everybody else who's saying you got to do this, you got to do that, right? Like that doesn't have to affect you.
It's so important that we design our businesses around ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to get yourself completely caught up in doing it this way or doing it that way, and that's the only way to do it. And unless you actually say, what do I want? How do I work best? What do I want my life to look like? Unless you actually take that into account, you build yourself models that just cannot work for you. It's one of the reasons I always focus in on people's energy patterns during the day or the week or the month, whatever, because unless you are really aware of how you work best, you're going to go off and design a business that is going to be a drain on you emotionally, energetically, psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
So you're continuing to develop, aren't you? Because you are bringing in new things that you're doing. And one of those is writing a book.
Yeah. So I actually wrote 2 books this year.
Wow.
I did not underachieve on that one. So the first book that I wrote was a co-authored book, which is cool. And that's going to be coming out in the next few weeks, as at the time of this recording. And that has been fun because it's been co-authored. So it was just one chapter. It was really easy and light. And it got me really finally remembering that I have been wanting to write a book for multiple years. But I always kind of put it off. And I said, I don't know if I can do this and all of that, right? You know how we do that. So I decided to write my own big long book front to back. And that's what we're working on now, and so that should be coming out in November.
And what's the book about exactly?
It's about creating, it's kind of like a call to arms for people who want to make a difference in the world, and really just helping to inspire them, to motivate them, and to give them some solid strategies they can apply right away to start to move that forward, to move their business forward.
Yeah. And so one of the things, I mean, obviously tapping people into understanding what their driver is one of the biggest things that you can do to inspire and motivate people. But I know that there's other things that you can. I was wondering if you could share some of the things that, some little tidbits of inspiration that are going to come forward in the book to help people think, oh yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the biggest things, right, and we've sort of touched on it a little bit throughout all of this conversation, is sales, right? Like your business cannot survive without sales. And it is the harsh reality of the world that we live in, right? So as people who want to make a difference in the world, we're very purpose driven. We want to help. We have to change the mindset from, okay, sales is bad, anything like associated with that, right? I don't want to be pushy, like all of that. We need to examine that. We need to work through that. And we have to make sure our drivers are more important than that critical self-talk that we're experiencing. So that for me is the most valuable thing. And then what that comes out as is executing on that plan, right? So how I was able to build my business so successfully with 2 kids under 2, with my daughter on breathing monitors, is because I focused on sales, right? I focused on sales activities. So, and then that is really the key thing, right? So if I have 2 hours to work on my business, I'm spending those 2 hours marketing and sales, right? And then, I can coach them in the afternoon or in the evening or whatever, right after kids go to bed. But for me, that was how I ran my business, and really just staying on top of the sales activities, on top of the marketing activities.
That's the big one, isn't it? It's very easy to get distracted by thinking, oh, I do need to do this and I need to do this and need to do that. But one of the things that I find that a lot of particularly newer entrepreneurs or seasoned business people who are coming into being an entrepreneur get sidelined by is not knowing what those important tasks are. And as you say, if you're not getting your message in front of people and you're not creating the opportunities to have those sales conversations and make those sales, then it's not the right thing to be focusing on. Yeah. Do those when you've got all of that in place. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the best place for people to come and find you and keep in touch with you?
So people can find me in my Facebook group, The Impact Driven Entrepreneur. That's probably the best place because I'm in there every day, multiple times a day, because that's my business model. Yeah, but that is my favorite place to hang out. And I'm doing semi-regular Facebook Lives there, and sharing lots of content, and the conversations there are really powerful. So there's lots of conversation starters there every day to help you connect with other people who are on this mission-driven, path and working through similar things.
Excellent. And you also have a podcast.
Yes. Oh, that's right. I do have a podcast. Thank you for reminding me. And that's the Impact Driven Entrepreneur podcast. It's on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and yeah.
Excellent. So people can find you. All of those links will be underneath the video, so you can just click on them and go and connect and keep in touch. And as soon as we have a link for the book, of course, we will put that on there as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing when it comes up and seeing what it's all the inspiration that's going to come forward from it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and some really, really useful tips there for people to sort of take away and think, look at themselves a little bit more deeply and say, okay, what is it that's driving me? So it's really important. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank